Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Melinda Nusafora. It's a move that could steer relations between Turkey and Greece off course. Turkey has deployed a ship to drill for oil and natural gas in the eastern Mediterranean Sea. It follows a series of heated exchanges between the NATO allies last month. At the heart of the dispute is just who controls the waters and has the rights to the wealth within them. James Kim has more.
A defiant move that will likely attract the ire of Greece.
İlk defa kendi gemimizde derin sondaj çalışmamızı başlatıyoruz.
Turkey has sent a ship to drill for oil and gas in the eastern Mediterranean. But those waters have been a sore spot for Turkey and Greece because they dispute who has jurisdiction over them. Before announcing the move, Ankara blasted Athens for what it says was the harassment of a Turkish exploration vessel in eastern Mediterranean waters on October 18th. Greece denied the charges, accusing Turkey of a new provocation and saying that it continues to act in a way that causes tension in the Aegean Sea and in the eastern Mediterranean.
I want them to know that we won't allow them to harass us a second time. I want them to say that it's impossible to conduct any project in this region without including Turkey and the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus.
This is just the latest in a maritime dispute stretching back decades. Ever since the Turkish military intervened in Cyprus following a Greek-inspired coup in 1974, the status of the island's maritime borders has been in question between Turkey, Greece, and Cyprus. The ambiguity over who controls what has complicated attempts to tap the region's rich hydrocarbon resources, estimated to be worth billions of dollars. Turkey has long denounced Cyprus's unilateral actions in exploring and drilling in the area. They argue that the resources also belong to Turkish Cypriots, and that any attempt to exploit the region's hydrocarbon wealth needs their input as well.
We are against unilateral actions, and we won't hesitate to take action to protect the interests of Turkish Cypriots and Turkey against these unilateral actions.
The recent tensions have put the NATO allies in an uncomfortable spot, and it could put their allies in one too. EU countries have been working closely with Turkey to stem the flow of refugees from Syria, offering billions of dollars to help the millions of Syrians living within Turkey. And despite having a complicated relationship over the past few years, ties between Ankara and Washington are slowly improving after Turkey recently released a jailed US pastor convicted of terrorism-related charges. But those positive gains could be put on hold if both the EU and the US are forced to choose sides in a dispute where neither Turkey or Greece are willing to back down. James Kim, Straight Talk.
Joining me now to talk about this further, we have Ahmet Sözen, who is the director of the Cyprus Policy Centre based in Northern Cyprus, and Konstantinos Travlos, an assistant professor of international relations at the Ozyen University. Gentlemen, thanks very much for joining us on Straight Talk. Konstantinos, I'm going to start with you. Tensions surrounding this issue have been bubbling away now since the 1970s. The current mission for the Fatih is not drilling in any of these contested waters. Why is this operation still considered a little bit provocative?
Well, you have to understand that the Greek view over the maritime issues, both in the Aegean and in the Cyprus region, is tied to the idea of sovereignty. And the Greek view is that Turkey, the Turkish Republic, and the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus as a part of the whole story is essentially questioning Greek sovereignty. In the case of the Western Aegean, the sovereignty of the Greek state. In the case of Cyprus, the sovereignty of the UN-recognized Republic of Cyprus. And that this is a story that is going back to 1913. And the refusal of the Ottoman Empire to recognize the ceding of the Aegean islands to Greece after the Balkan War. So it's considered as a continuous challenge. And that's why there is a lot of worry and anger over it.
So a continuous challenge. But Ahmed, if I can ask you, how provocative is this move, and is it likely that this current mission by the Fatih could spark a showdown that maybe we've been on the brink of for quite some time?
Well, it's interesting that whenever there was a problem between Greece and Turkey, it was usually the foreign ministers who would make the public statements regarding the issue. This time around, it was the Minister of Defense in Turkey, it was like the Minister of War, who made the statement, which I think showed that Turkey is serious in terms of not letting any Greek army to harass any of the exploratory drilling. So,
and is that interpreted as being quite provocative on the Cyprus side?
Yes, definitely. So, I mean, this shows the seriousness. This shows the kind of the firm stance that Turkey has on this, and I think that the messages have been received. Personally, I do not really expect a clash between Greek and Turkish armies in this case. We have seen much worse cases in the past, by the way, between Greece and Turkey, where they came to the brink of war, especially on the Imia-Kardak crisis back in the 1990s. So, but I think that the common sense on both sides will prevail, and we are not going to hit to a wall.
You're nodding very vigorously there, Konstantinos. Do you agree?
Yes, I don't think necessarily that we're going to have an escalation in this case. But the problem is that Greece and Turkey are a dangerous dyad. We are in a situation of lesser rivalry, which means we are in a condition where, on average, we have a higher chance of seeing militarized disputes, and those militarized disputes escalating, God forbid, one day to war. So while this current crisis will not necessarily escalate, it's important for both sides to understand that we have to manage this relationship carefully.
All right, well, let's talk about how then, because both countries, Turkey and Greece, have been struggling a little bit economically. So it's not as if either side is going to back down and say, help yourself to all these valuable hydrocarbons. So how do you see them coming to some sort of agreement? Okay,
so an easy move on the part of the Turkish government will be to get rid of the casus belli over the extension of the Greek maritime waters to 12 nautical miles. And Turkey still can say, we don't think that such an extension would be a good idea. We'll rather negotiate over it. But there's no casus belli anymore. We're not going to go automatically to war. So that will be a powerful symbolic move that will provide an opening for later other symbolic moves, and down the way for more concrete moves on both sides that could transform this relationship from a lesser rivalry to a negative peace, and why not, at some point, a positive peace. That will be like a quick move. How easy it is, that's a big question. Other moves that can happen, decoupling the Cyprus issue from the Western Aegean issue. In Greece, the view is that the Western Aegean issue started because of the Cyprus issue. Like, you know, before the Cyprus issue, Turkey had more or less accepted the status quo in the Aegean, especially during the times of the early Turkish Republic, of Atatürk's presidency, the Ankara Pact, and so on. But then Cyprus happened, and immediately after Cyprus happened, this whole discussion starts.
Actually, that leads me to a question I want to put to you then, Ahmet. What needs to happen first? Do we need to settle the Cyprus issue? The peace talks, do they need to resume before we can settle these maritime disputes? Or is it the other way around?
No, absolutely. Definitely, Cyprus would be a game changer. Definitely, the start should be on solving the Cyprus problem. Because if the Cyprus problem is resolved, some of these issues that we are talking about today will become non-issues. They will become irrelevant. It will be much easier if the Cyprus problem is resolved for all the stakeholders, for all the parties to come together on the same table and negotiate their differences and come to a compromise on all these issues that are now issues which, in a way, nicely managed in the last maybe a decade or so between Greece and Turkey, by the way. So I think that we have the background and the common sense that they will remain in a manageable, let's say, conflictual situation. But I think that the key is to solve first the Cyprus problem, and then solving the other problems will be much easier.
We will see. Time will tell. This is definitely something that's not going to go away anytime soon. Ahmet Sözen and Konstantinos Travlos, thank you so much for being here on Straight Talk. It's been a tumultuous year for Turkey's economy. The value of the local currency, the lira, has plummeted. Back in August, it hit record lows almost on a daily basis. And inflation has been surging, putting the brakes on some foreign investment. But one industry has made the best of a bad situation. Turkey's tourism sector is having a great year. And as Ömer Kablan tells us, many operators are expecting 2018 to be the best yet.
The pearl of the Mediterranean. Turquoise seas and pristine beaches. The Turkish city of Muğla has been boosting its profile as the go-to spot for tourists and as a top destination for water sports.
We discovered this last year. We really fall in love with it because of the constant wind, nice people, very good food and good infrastructure. I think it's one of the best spots in Europe for sure.
One sport that's becoming more popular with tourists is scuba diving. Elite Diving Center, which operates in Fethiye, says it's using innovative ways to get more people into the water. Along with providing beautiful scenery, the company claims it can recreate everyday activities underwater. The aquatic life in Turkey's coastal seas is vibrant.
I have all my scuba gear on, and like the thousands of tourists who come to Turkey every year to dive, I too will take a plunge in these beautiful waters.
There are many diving schools here. This season, I can say that all the diving tours have done very good business. Diving has become an important contributor to the Turkish economy.
Turkey's booming tourism sector seems to be the silver lining in a year filled with economic uncertainty. During the height of a dispute between Ankara and Washington in August, the Turkish lira plunged, ending nearly 40% down against the US dollar compared to January. But the cheap lira also meant cheap holidays, especially for tourists from Europe. A deal for a 7-night full-board sailing holiday in Turkey would cost as little as $250 per person, whereas a 1-week holiday in Rome would cost around $1,000 per person. Ümit Karaaslan, who has been the mayor of this town for 20 years, says he's seen a surging number of visitors this year.
Hotels and accommodation owners are happy. Tourists have different demands. Some want peace and quiet, some want to do something more active like water sports. Here, tourists can find the best of both worlds.
And many businesses are cashing in. The number of foreign tourists to Turkey is up 23% compared to last year, reaching 32 million in the first 9 months. Tourism revenue has also increased, which now stands at $11.5 billion. And Turkey's newest airport, planned to be the world's largest, has officially opened in Istanbul. The $25 billion mega project will be able to handle up to 90 million passengers by 2021, with further expansion leading to a total capacity of up to 200 million. It's a bet the Turkish government is making, not only to make Istanbul a global aviation hub, but also to bring in an increasing number of tourists for the years to come. And with a view like this, no wonder tourists are pouring in. Ömer Kablan, Straight Talk.
And joining me in the studio to discuss why the tourism industry is flying high, we have Halil Korkmaz, who is the chairman of the Istanbul Tourism Association, and Maria Alvarez, who is the head of the Boğaziçi University's Department of Tourism Management. Thank you very much for being here to discuss this topic today. Maria, I'm going to start with you. No doubt 2016, disastrous year. We had terrorist attacks, we had the failed coup attempt. Numbers were down 30%. Is it too early to say that the industry has now recovered?
Well, yes, I think it is too early to say that it has recovered. I mean, we are seeing large increase in tourist arrivals. I think that the projections for the end of the year are that there's going to be over 40 million tourists coming to Turkey, which is about the level that it was before the 2016, 2015 or so. However, when we look at it from the receipts, the tourist receipts in dollar terms, I mean, we have seen that there has not been such an increase in the tourist receipts.
It's a very minor increase. I think something only like about 1%.
1% if we compare the third. I think, I mean, the exchange rate is one of the issues here as well, because even though the tourists may be spending more in Turkish liras, when it is translated to US dollars, this is also a reduced spending. I mean, we can see that on average $612 have been spent per capita in the last quarter. And this is way lower than it was in the first quarter of this year, and definitely lower than it was in previous years.
So if we are talking about the reduced lira having an impact, Halil, I'm going to put this to you. Is that a good thing, though, because it means we are able to attract more tourists because it seems like a cheap place to holiday? Can it be a positive?
Actually, I would like to add some opinion with the professor that there is no other country like Turkey that after all that bad things happening and then such a short time recovering. And
it has been a very rapid recovery.
Yeah, very quickly. And actually the year 2017, it was for us recovering year, and for the number of tourists, 2018, now we reach huge number of tourists. It's a record, actually. Each market, if we analyze it, for example, Russian market, European market, in European, German, and British market, that last 2 years they were coming very less because of all this thing happened, but they miss Turkey, and those people, those nations, yearly like 3-4 times was traveling to Turkey for certain period, and like in autumn, summer, and the winter time, different holidays, and they were very happy to come here. And when they see the all is calm, and then they start to visit it. So that's one of the reason, actually.
Talking about the fact that all is calm, I mean, the brand of Turkey was damaged for a little while there with those security concerns. Maria, let me ask you, is that the biggest issue that the Turkish brand of tourism has to fight with regards to attracting more American tourists, luxury tourists, conferences? Is it security concerns?
Yes, I mean, security concerns. I mean, there are some markets that are quicker to recover than others. And for example, the American market is a little bit slower, and there have been also some additional external politics and international relations concerns. I mean, so not just security and terror. So usually, I mean, external international relations is an issue for some markets. I mean, if there is a good relation between two countries, it is easier for those markets to come. In terms of, for example, the cruise market, this is a market that plans quite ahead. So it is difficult for that market to recover. So we can see, for example, that the main cruise companies have said that they will start to resume their travels to Turkey in 2019 and 2020, but they are not yet here. In terms of conference and congresses, this is again we can say the same thing. So Turkey, for example, was number 18 worldwide in 2015, but it dropped to number 49 in 2017.
And if we're looking at getting more people into Turkey, Khalil, we've got the new Istanbul airport. How important is that going to be for the tourism industry?
Yeah, first of all, it's very good news and good development. It's a huge development. It's very, very good for the Turkey and especially for Istanbul. First of all, this they will fully capacity maybe within 2 years they will reach 200 million passenger, but within 1 year they will serve 90 million tourists, and they, something like 35% of the passenger, as far as I know, that it's going to be transit passenger, and we are aiming this transit passenger to stay in Istanbul and to create another $1 billion of income for Istanbul tourism.
A lot to look forward to. Hopefully 2019, 2020, we may top these record years, and fingers crossed more money comes in on the back of that. Khalil and Maria, thank you so much for discussing this with us on Straight Talk.
Thanks for inviting.
Thank you.
The Syrian war, now in its 8th year, has seen at least 500,000 people killed and more than 5.5 million flee the country. But there are hundreds of forgotten victims, zoo animals which were left behind when their handlers escaped. Unfortunately, most have died, but like their two-legged countrymen and women, some were rescued and are now starting new lives abroad. Adel Halim tells us how they made their journey to safety.
The Syrian war has led to a devastating humanitarian crisis, but the collateral damage doesn't end there. When we talk about Syrian refugees, certain images immediately come to mind, but often forgotten are these guys, the four-legged survivors left behind. And to bring them here to safety, 500 kilometers away in Jordan's Al Mawa Animal Sanctuary required a high-risk rescue mission. Syria's Magic World Zoo once had 300 animals. As people did their best to escape the bloodshed, those animals were left for dead. And after years of war, only 13 of them remained. That's when an international animal welfare group came up with a dangerous rescue plan. It required a convoy of security vehicles to take them through several checkpoints from Syria through to Turkey and eventually fly them out to Jordan. For the mission to succeed, everything needed to fall into place. Leading the July 2017 charge were some veterinarians from a Vienna-based animal welfare organization.
So we are right here on the border. It's a little bit surreal situation. You have minefields behind and a lot of military, but we are here to rescue the animals, so you really have to focus.
After a lengthy wait, they were given the green light.
So it was really incredible exception to leave the border open for us and from both sides, and to manage to have the animals here.
The convoy had to wait 3 weeks at a rescue station in Turkey for permits and medical examinations. That's where Okan Aflaz came in. The Turkish animal rights activist helped secure clearance from the Ministry of Forestry.
These animals are victims of war. We saved 13, but 40 more are dead. They are survivors.
After flying from Istanbul to Amman, the animals arrived at their new home, visibly nervous. Soon after, they began to enjoy more room to wander and a steady diet that they were missing in Syria.
So this is Sukkar, one of the 2 Asian black bears that was rescued from Syria. When he arrived, he was skin and bone, literally. Hello, Sukkari.
So Dr. Zain Shaheen helped work on Sukkar's diet and also noticed an improvement in his mental health. She says it's a lot of stress on the animals to be sedated, transported, and then to wake up in a cage.
I think it's pretty much the same suffering, whether it's a human being or an animal or even a tree. But when it comes to the animals, I think it's just the voice that differs.
The challenges are obvious: physical injuries and psychological damage. But they are quick learners. When Sukar sees his green food truck in the distance, he does what he can to get a better look, and then goes for a swim. A far cry from his living quarters in Syria.
I really believe that animals bring people together. It's quite amazing how everybody works, even though they're not friendly to each other. But with animals it becomes, let's all work together and get those animals to safety.
After an exhausting journey from a war zone to a new home, these animals can now begin a longer, but a much safer, road to recovery. Adil Halim, Straight Talk, Jerash, Jordan.
That's all for this edition of Straight Talk with me, Melinda Nusafora. If you've got any suggestions or comments, do share them with us on Twitter with #StraightTalk. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Until next time, take care and goodbye.